Greetings and welcome back to room 303, and we turn now in your hymnals to page 635 and the other Emily Dickinson poem, Much Madness is Divinest Sense. Now you're starting to get a sense of how to read Emily Dickinson by virtue of that simple language with those dashes, and yet what she has to say is profound. I've had freshmen who say, this is one of the coolest poems they ever read. Let's take a look at this poem. She says it this way: much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye, much sense the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this as all prevail, assent, and you're saying, demure, you're straightway dangerous, handled with a chain. Now, one of the cool things about Emily Dickinson's poetry is that she will put words together in such a way that at first glance it might seem inaccessible, difficult. And yet, once we start playing the game, and I'm going to say this out loud as freshman students, you never want to be intimidated by any text. So when you look at it for the first time, you might go, oh, I got no idea. No, don't give up so easily. Let's go back and let's work through the ideas of this poem really quickly, and let's see why so many of my freshman students say this is one of the coolest poems that they ever read. Take a look. She starts out by talking about a distinction, a difference between madness and sense. What does it mean to be crazy? What does it mean to be sane? And look at what she says. This is our paradox. Much madness, insanity, is divinest sense to a discerning eye. In other words, if you know discern, if you know how to think, crazy equals sane. Sane equals crazy. If you know how to think. Which right away makes you go, no. We define crazy as insane, and we define sane as being not crazy. She says, much sense, right? Normal. The starkest madness. What? In what kind of world do you live in where crazy people are the sane people and the sane people are the crazy people? Can you explain that? And then the next line. 'Tis, that means it is, the majority in this as all prevail. Oh, watch this. Here's the question, the guiding question. In our world, let's call it Worland High School, who gets to decide who is crazy and who is sane? Who gets to decide what is normal and what is different? The majority. Oh. What we decide as being acceptable is usually defined by the majority, or as sometimes it's been called, the populars in any school. What are you wearing that for? In other words, code language. We don't wear that at Worland High. We all wear this. And that means we get to decide. The majority gets to decide what's acceptable or what's unacceptable. What is insane or what's sane. The majority, as all, prevail. That means wins. Look at the next line. Now all of a sudden it'll start to make sense to you. Assent, that means you agree with the populars, with the majority, and you're sane. Okay, we will accept you. You are one of us. Demure, that means go against the majority. Go against the populars. And you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. Of course, Dickinson is writing, by the way, during a time when the abolitionist movement is already starting to really make claims against this whole notion of slavery. And so the whole notion of slavery is clearly a part of this. To what degree do you allow yourself to be chained by the opinions of the majority? She says, here's the problem with the majority. They make rules that are silly rules. They make expectations for you that are silly expectations. And the minute you stand up to the majority, you're considered dangerous. And what will they do? Well, they start making fun of you. They ridicule you. They handle you with a chain. You can't be in our group. See how this works? Because you don't agree with us. All of a sudden, Emily Dickinson's little poem is an analysis of what it's like to live in a crazy world that thinks it's sane. I'll tell you the most insane thing in the world, jumping off of the cliff along with everybody else. Remember that question that your mom used to ask you when you were in middle? If everyone else jumped off the cliff, would you jump off the cliff? Emily Dickinson says, yeah. And while I jump off, I'm going to be saying it. I'm sane because I'm following everybody else. Remember at 3a, in this world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Longfellow, of course, and Dickinson contemporaries. This is a beautiful kind of way to study Emily Dickinson. That's why so many of my students love this poem. Anybody can say, forget about the majority. They got no clue who I really am. I'm going my own way. It takes a brilliant poet to say, here's the problem. You go against the majority, people are going to talk about you. They're going to make fun of you. Of course, Dickinson had a contemporary named Ralph Waldo Emerson who said it in his famous essay, Self-Reliance, to be great is to be misunderstood. If you go against the majority, you're going to be marginalized, made fun of, and the like. All right, let's play the game now at level 2A. Now that you know the poem, right, you can begin to play games with the theme and the messages. What is it that she's saying? Well, of course she's saying, pay attention to the way in which you allow yourself to so easily be led by the majority. Oh, I've got to do what everybody else is doing, or they'll think I'm nuts, or they'll think there's something wrong with me, or they'll think I'm dangerous, and I'll be handled with a chain. There's another message here, and it's the obvious message of the great iconoclastic thinker Emily Dickinson. Forget about what other people think all the time. You decide what your values are. You live your core values. And if people around you don't get on with those core values, well, Thoreau, another contemporary of Dickinson, said it in Walden, some people dance or march to the beat of a different drum. And that's a beautiful thing, right? He who would be a man must be a nonconformist, Emerson will say. Another observation in 3a. To what degree, another message at level 2a, to what degree is your life controlled by fear of what other people think? That, Emily Dickinson says, is insanity. That is insanity. Craziness. Note at 2b the power of the dash. Do you see all these dashes in this poem, right? Notice even sometimes, like the third line, the dash is in the middle, which, if you're reading technically, the dash is supposed to provide a pause. So go back and look at it again. Much madness is divinest sense, pause, to a discerning eye, pause. Much sense, pause, the starkest madness. What's up with all these pauses? Again, these dashes. The what is it, how does it work, rhetorically speaking? Well, many have pointed out that her poetic tendency here is to make you think in between the phrases as you begin to kind of play the game that Emily Dickinson is playing poetically. Can I say this out loud? Nobody wrote poems like this before Dickinson. She is herself violating the very poetic rules that are kind of laid down for her day. This is not a poem, people would say. This is just kind of words on the page. In other words, Dickinson is saying to her critiquers, my poetry is my poetry. I go my own way. I don't care if you think I'm crazy. At 3a, well, this is, of course, the question of other texts. What other texts? I've mentioned already some of those great American transcendentalists who will say, if you're going to be somebody, you got to be a nonconformist. Everybody's going to tell you, Emerson says in Self-Reliance, everybody tells you your business. Everybody tells you what you should be doing. At what point do you actually begin to live your own life, in your own way, on your own terms? Whoa, that's a very interesting question. Why is it that we're so easily swayed? What text teaches you that that's important for you to stand up? Do you play a video game that suggests this as well? We mentioned Longfellow's Psalm of Life, be a hero in the strife. Don't be like dumb driven cattle. What is it for you? What's the text for you that teaches you that you have to go your own way, even if other people, right? I mean, think about now at 3b. Think about the ways in which this works in your own inner circle. With your own friends. Do you have friends you can disagree with and they still accept you as the friend? Or do you have a friend and or friends where everything you say has to be their opinion? That's not a real friendship. The great Aristotle, the great philosopher, said, a true friend is the one who you can contradict, and he or she will be pleased by the contradiction. Because you can coexist. Or rather, you got to listen to the same music. You got to have the same opinions. You got to have the same views. If you have different views, something's wrong. I had a senior once who found this out. That evening, all of his buddies and him hanging out, and he said, I think I'm going to go to college and try it. And they all started laughing at him. They all started laughing at him. And he said, no, dude, I'm serious. I think I am going to try and go to college. And now they laughed even harder. Why did they laugh? Because none of them are going to college. And they certainly can't afford or abide the idea that one of their group would step out. And Emily Dickinson says, who is crazy? What is sanity? To decide that the only thing you'll ever do is the stuff somebody else tells you to do? That is insanity. Finally, at 3B, we'll ask this question. What is for you a time in your life? Two-part question. What is a time in your life when you went along with the group and you now have to admit that you wish you hadn't? What was a time in your life, if you will, that you were insane because you thought you were sane? You thought you were doing something intelligent by going along with everybody else. And then finally, what was a time in your life when you stood up and said, no, I ain't doing it. No, I'm not. Just because you want to do it doesn't mean I got to do it. I go my own way. Right? What was a time when you were sane and people thought you were crazy because you followed yourself, you followed your own way? What was a time when you maybe were straightway dangerous and handled with a chain, and yet you're proud of that moment? Because you look back with the help of this poem, you look back at that moment and you go, I'm really glad I did it my way. I'm really glad I made the decision that I made on my terms. Well, there you go, an introduction to Emily Dickinson's little classic, Much Madness is Divinest Sense. Thank you.